I need to write this down. Maybe someone will believe me. Maybe I will. The last thing I remember is stepping through door 13. There was no sense of forward or backward, only a sideways tilt, as if reality itself had been nudged by an unseen hand. The air tasted of metal, like a coin pressed hard against my tongue, and then came the snap, sharp and merciless, like a page torn from a book and shoved back in the wrong place. When my vision steadied, I was back in Whispering Pines Motel. At least, that's what it looked like. I lay on the same bed, shoes still on, the quilt covered in cigarette burns I didn't remember noticing before. Outside the blinds, the neon coughed its tired glow. Vacancy, then VCNCY, then VACNCY. Letters flickered out of order like time itself was stuttering. On the nightstand, my phone blinked 11:15, then changed to 11:14, then back again, as though the numbers were no longer measuring time but only pretending to. The wall clock's second hand was no longer a hand at all, but a black strand of hair pressed under the glass, twitching forward and back without purpose. At first glance, the room seemed familiar, but the longer I looked, the more it folded into something wrong. The ice bucket was still there, but the tongs dripped water as if freshly used. The carpet smelled of bleach and damp air, though the window was shut. The TV was dark, yet it held my reflection in the dust, like a memory waiting to be recalled. When I stood, the carpet crunched underfoot. It wasn't salt. It was ash. Each footprint darkened rather than lightened, and behind me, the bed sighed as if someone heavier than me had just laid down. My name is still Michael Brennan, but it no longer feels like it belongs to me. The syllables drag in my mouth, uneven and weighted. My left palm bears the scar from the mirror, the crescent mark burned into my skin, but reversed, as though the story of me had been flipped on its axis. I am not the Michael who walked in. I'm a sentence rewritten, rearranged into something that feels familiar, but carries a different rhythm. The thought makes me shiver, not because of what it means, but because of what it suggests. The old version of me has already been erased. I turned on the sink, and the water ran not as a stream, but in ribbons, each one a different color, blue for a breath, then gold, then a deep red like stale wine. I cupped it and felt it warm like exhaled breath against my skin. The mirror fogged before the steam rose, and when my reflection appeared, it was half a beat late. It raised its hand after mine, smiled when I did not, and left a smear on the glass I never touched. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was trying to mimic me or correct me. That thought was worse than seeing nothing at all. Then came the weight. No sound, no movement, just the pressure of mass behind me. The blinds rattled, the neon flickered, and I turned. Pixel sat on the dresser, his body still shaped like a cat, but too precise, too deliberate. His fur shone like poured oil, every strand reflecting nothing. His eyes were not cat's eyes anymore. They were lenses, aperture yellow, recorder yellow, devouring light instead of catching it. His tail swept arcs across the dust, each stroke leaving a mark that refused to fade, as though he were drawing invisible lines only he could understand. "Hey," I whispered, but my voice cracked in my throat. Pixel did not look at me. His head tilted toward the mirror, gauging the lag between me and my reflection. Then he jumped down, landing silently on the ash. He circled me in perfect arcs, always 2 feet from my right knee, as if orbiting me. No matter how I moved, forward, sideways, quick or slow, he moved too, flawless and synchronized. He wasn't following me, he was containing me, and I felt the walls lean closer in agreement. The TV sputtered and died, the ceiling fan chain trembled as though brushed by unseen hands, and I sat down because I needed to feel gravity hold me. Pixel sat too, exactly aligned, the same 2 feet of distance like a rule written into the room itself. The drawer of the nightstand slid open smoothly, no longer the stubborn thing I remembered. Inside was a cheap vinyl notebook. The cover smelled faintly of copper, and though it was blank, the blankness was wrong, like a patch, something removed and replaced with nothing. My hand hovered over it, heat building in my chest before I even touched it. Then the door spoke. Not a voice, not words, but the slow groan of the hinge stretched into shape, forming my name. Michael. My skin prickled as the sound filled the room. It was not a greeting but an authorization, a reminder that whatever was outside already knew me, maybe better than I did. I leaned toward the peephole. Black, empty, but then I heard it, my own breathing on the other side of the door, half a beat early, as though another me waited for permission to enter. Pixel moved into the doorway and sat in its exact center, his body still as stone. His pupils narrowed to threads, then widened until yellow swallowed yellow. And in those impossible eyes, I saw flashes of frames, snapshots of me in places I had never been, making choices I had never made, a ledger of versions I could not deny, recorded and waiting. My throat tightened. I was being measured, archived, rewritten again and again until one of us stuck. I touched the notebook. The vinyl was ice cold, burning through my skin. My thumb left an oval mark that deepened the longer I held it, as if the book was memorizing my heat. The first page turned without my help. Outside, the neon sign steadied for one breath, all letters glowing perfect. Then, one letter fell away. Vacancy became vani, meaningless, but dangerously close to too many words. Pixel lifted his head and truly looked at me for the first time. "I'm not the same," I whispered, though the sentence felt unfinished. Something in the air pressed for the rest of it, the part I didn't want to say aloud in case it became permanent. Inside my chest, the hinge groaned once more, and when I looked down, I saw it waiting on the paper, a faint smear of red, like someone had already begun writing my story before I arrived. The notebook trembled faintly in my hands, as if it wanted to open itself wider. I forced the cover back and found the first page already waiting for me. The paper was bright, too clean, almost wet in places where faint streaks of red shimmered like veins. My breath caught when I saw the words etched across the center in jagged script, written as though someone had carved them directly into the fibers. There can only be one. Nothing else. No context, no explanation. Just those 6 words, like a decree written in blood. I stared at the page, waiting for it to shift into something else, but the sentence held, unwavering, as if it were older than the room itself. The ink, or whatever it was, had texture, ridges sharp enough to scrape my fingertip. When I touched it, a pulse jolted through my arm, hot and cold at the same time, and for a moment I saw flashes in my head, dozens of motel rooms stacked like cards, each one holding a Michael, each one turning to see the same page. The sensation left me dizzy, and when I blinked, the room snapped back into shape, though the ash under my feet seemed darker than before. Pixel had not moved. He sat in the corner now, his body aligned like a sentry, his tail wrapped around his paws. His eyes narrowed, recording me with that same terrible patience. I realized he wasn't here to comfort me anymore. He was here to watch, to make sure the rule was obeyed. There can only be one. The phrase repeated in my mind, like the tick of a clock that no longer needed hands. Each time I heard it, the room seemed to adjust, as though it were tightening itself around me. The mirror was the first to betray me. I glanced at it and saw not one reflection, but 2. The first lagged by a heartbeat, the same as before, but now another shape drifted behind it, a blurred silhouette of a man with my outline but no face. The faceless figure raised its hand, not to copy me, but to touch the reflection of me, as if claiming ownership. My stomach dropped, and before I could turn away, the mirror whispered, "Only one remains." The voice was dry, brittle, like paper tearing. I backed away until my knees hit the bed frame. The door followed next. Its surface swelled, the wood flexing inward like lungs taking in air. Faint whispers leaked through the peephole, not words but breaths, syncing with mine until I couldn't tell if I was inhaling or the door was. Then, suddenly, silence. The stillness was worse than the whispers. It was the kind of silence that waits for a decision. I forced myself not to move, not to answer, but the truth clawed at me. The world outside this room wanted me to choose. The clock had stopped pretending altogether. The hair taped under the glass no longer twitched. It had become a deep black crack spreading across the face. I watched as it branched into smaller fractures, each one branching again, like veins or roots crawling across the wall. The ash beneath my shoes vibrated softly, pulsing with each line that formed. When I lifted my foot, the print left behind stretched upward, as if the shadow of my step wanted to rise and walk without me. I turned back to the notebook, desperate for some answer, but the page was already changing. The words blurred, melted, and then returned sharper, darker, almost alive. There can only be one. This time, beneath the sentence, a faint impression appeared, an outline shaped like my own face, pressed into the page from below. The imprint smiled when I did not. My chest seized and I slammed the book shut, but the mark lingered in my mind, a brand burned into memory. Pixel moved for the first time since I opened the notebook. He padded slowly to the bed, eyes never leaving me, and sat again 2 feet from my knee. His tail lashed once, sharp, deliberate, and my arm throbbed with the pulse I'd felt earlier. When I looked at my hand, faint red lines traced across my palm, forming the same words etched in the notebook. My skin had begun to carry the rule. There can only be one. I wanted to scream, to deny it, to throw the notebook into the sink and watch it burn, but the water still ran in ribbons of shifting colors, each one showing me fragments of other rooms, other Michaels. They flickered by like film reels, one curled on the floor weeping, another scratching at the walls, another already dead. And yet in every version, Pixel was there, sitting, watching, his golden eyes swallowing the light. The cat was not mine anymore. He never had been. He belonged to the rule. The air thickened, pressing against my chest until I felt suffocated. I stumbled to the door, thinking maybe escape was possible, but when I touched the handle it felt alive, warm and beating like a heart. The peephole expanded, stretching wider, and for a moment I saw a face staring back at me. My own. Pale, trembling, lips whispering words I couldn't hear, but his eyes were clear, sharp, and they mouthed a single sentence. You don't eliminate me. You become me. I staggered back, clutching my chest, and Pixel let out a sound, a low, guttural rumble, not a purr, not a growl, but something caught between. It vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the ash, and the notebook on the bed sprang open by itself. The pages fluttered like wings before settling once again on that same sentence, darker now, blood seeping into the fibers as though freshly written. The lights in the room flickered once, twice, and then froze, locking everything in sharp stillness. I knew then what the rule meant. There would be no survival for both of us, no coexistence. Only one Michael was allowed to remain in this rewritten world, and if I didn't decide, the world would do it for me. Hook, or a frontier. The notebook's final line, beneath the smeared imprint of my face, fresh words began to bleed through. Choose, or be erased. The words on the page bled deeper into the paper, but my eyes refused to linger. The air around me shifted, heavy with something I could not see but could feel pressing against my skin. It was the kind of pressure that makes your ribs ache, like being underwater too long. My ears popped, and in the silence that followed, I heard them. Faint whispers layered on top of one another, not coming from the notebook, not from Pixel, but from the walls themselves. At first I thought it was just echoes of my own breath, but then one of the voices spoke my full name with a weight and certainty that belonged to someone who had lived it before me. I froze. The sound grew clearer, multiplying into a chorus, each whisper slightly off pitch, overlapping and collapsing into each other like radio static tuned across too many stations at once. They were saying things I had thought, things I had done, memories I recognized but in voices that weren't mine. You burned me. You let me die. You left me behind. The accusations swelled, turning the motel room into a courtroom where the jury was made up of every version of myself that had ever failed. I clutched the notebook to my chest, as if holding it tighter might stop the bleeding of those words into me. The ash beneath my feet began to move. At first it was subtle, a faint shifting like wind across a surface, but then it rose, pulling itself into fragile forms, outlines of torsos, arms, shoulders. They were incomplete, shadows sculpted from residue, not flesh, not light. Their faces were smeared, unfinished, but I knew them. I knew them because they carried my weight, my stance, my posture. Each shadow was Michael, or had been, before the rule had erased them. They dragged themselves closer with movements like smudged frames in a broken film. Traitor, one hissed. Its mouth didn't move, but the sound was inside my head. Another raised its arm, skinless and gray, pointing at me as if to mark me guilty. I stumbled backward, but every step pressed me against another presence. They surrounded me, incomplete bodies clawing toward wholeness, hungry for the scraps of me that still existed. One pressed its hand against my chest, and I felt myself hollow out, a sensation like my bones turning to dust. My vision blurred, edges fraying, as though my own shadow wanted to peel free and join theirs. Pixel hissed for the first time, not the sound of an ordinary cat, but a piercing, static shriek that made the walls tremble. His eyes glowed wide, catching every movement of the shades. For a moment they recoiled, twitching as though burned by his gaze. But then they steadied, and one whispered, "Even he can't protect you. You belong to us." I felt a chill creep down my arms, and when I glanced at my skin, I saw faint gray lines spidering beneath the flesh, mapping paths toward dissolution. The shadows pressed harder. One tried to climb into me, its form half fading into my chest, cold as smoke but heavy as stone. My lungs seized, breath stolen as if it wanted to replace mine with its own. I stumbled toward the mirror, desperate for an anchor, and that was when I saw them all, every erased Michael staring back, crowded into the glass. They clawed at its surface from the other side, their mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow, skin peeling like old photographs. The reflection of me was gone, overwritten by an audience of failures. I wanted to run, to leave the motel behind, but the room itself had grown unrecognizable. The wallpaper bubbled with faces pressing outward. The clock spun backwards, then shattered entirely, scattering hands like broken teeth onto the floor. The door pulsed again, the wood swelling as if it wanted to birth another version of me into the room. The notebook fell from my hands, snapping shut, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more demanding, like a choir chanting in reverse. One of the shadows leaned close, its head almost brushing mine. I could smell it, musty, like books left to rot in a basement, but with an undertone of burned hair. Its lips grazed my ear, and I felt the words more than I heard them. "You can't kill us. You are us." My knees buckled, and I fell against the dresser. The ash around me thickened, climbing my legs, pulling me down as though it wanted to bury me alive in their graveyard. My heart pounded, but even its rhythm felt stolen, belonging to too many of us at once. Pixel leapt onto the bed, his eyes wide, tail lashing, ears flat. His mouth opened, and I heard, not a hiss, not a growl, but words clear and cold. "One remains." My blood ran ice cold. I'd never heard him speak, but I didn't doubt what I heard. His decree cut through the chorus of whispers, but instead of silencing them, it only enraged them. The shadows surged, hands stretching, mouths gaping, each one desperate to crawl into me and claim my skin as theirs. I clawed at my own arms, trying to rip the gray lines out before they spread. My skin burned, but the marks only deepened, veins tracing themselves in patterns that matched the shadows' movements. I tried to shout, to deny them, but the sound died in my throat. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to merge, to overwrite me the way the rule demanded. My body shook as if I were already losing, splitting into copies that had nowhere to go but inside me. And then the mirror shifted again. The crowd of faces parted, and one stepped forward. Not a blur, not incomplete. A perfect image of me, or rather the me I thought I had destroyed, the double I had burned, erased, left behind. His skin was whole, his eyes gleamed with cruel recognition, and his smile split across the glass like a wound reopening. He leaned close, his mouth brushing the barrier between us, and whispered with my voice, twisted into something darker. You didn't kill me. You became me. I stumbled back from the mirror, clutching my chest as if I could hold myself together with my own hands. The grin of my dead double still lingered behind the glass, his voice echoing in my skull long after the reflection dissolved. My knees shook, but when I looked down, the shadows that had tried to crawl into me were gone, scattered into drifting ash that pulsed once and then stilled. The silence was heavier than the noise had been, and in that silence I heard only one sound, Pixel's claws tapping against the wooden dresser as he leapt down. The room had shifted its allegiance. I was no longer fighting the shadows. I was under surveillance. Pixel's eyes fixed on me, two perfect golden circles that gleamed not with life but with recording light, like camera lenses that didn't blink. He padded forward with deliberate slowness, each step falling with weight far greater than a creature his size should have carried. His tail curled upward, stiff and sharp, less like fur and more like a cable plugged into something unseen. When he reached me, I felt a heat radiate off his body, though it wasn't warmth. It was static, buzzing cold that pricked my skin like needles of ice. I reached down, instinctively, but the moment my fingers brushed his fur, pain seared through my hand. I yanked back with a cry, but the damage was already done. My palm burned with a perfect oval scar, a brand etched into me not by heat, but by absence, as if the touch had stolen the flesh's memory of what it was supposed to be. The skin blistered pale and then darkened, and when I blinked, I swore I saw words forming in the wound, fragments of the rule, fragments of myself. Pixel sat calmly before me, tail swishing once, eyes never leaving mine. He had given me proof. Stored memories were not deleted. They were waiting, embedded in my own body, surfacing through pain. Pixel, I whispered, the name tasting strange on my tongue. He tilted his head, but there was no recognition in the gesture. It was the movement of a machine calibrating. His mouth opened slightly, and for the second time that night, words emerged. Not a hiss, not a growl, but a sound like an old tape rewinding. Stored memories, the voice rasped, broken but unmistakable, are not deleted. They are waiting. The syllables cracked and looped as if they had been spoken countless times before by countless mouths, recorded and replayed until the meaning frayed. The air in the room thickened, pressing down like a weighted blanket. The walls shifted, the wallpaper peeling into rows of thin vertical lines like prison bars. Each time I moved, Pixel adjusted, always positioning himself between me and the door, between me and the window. It was no longer coincidence. He wasn't just watching me, he was keeping me here. The realization sank in with icy clarity. Pixel wasn't my cat anymore. He never had been. He was the warden of this rewritten world, his purpose not to comfort me, but to contain me until the rewrite was complete. I tried to sidestep him, edging toward the door, but he moved faster than I could see. One moment he was at my feet, the next he was already planted firmly in the doorway, tail lashing like a pendulum, counting down seconds I no longer had. His eyes dilated, and I saw the glow spread across the walls, casting frames of myself in every direction, me sleeping, me screaming, me burning the double, me staring into mirrors. It was all there, a film reel projected in golden light, and Pixel was the projector. My every action was archived, every mistake waiting to be replayed. The ceiling fan above creaked, its chain swaying without wind. The shadows in the corners stretched longer, but none dared cross the circle of light Pixel cast. Even the whispers had fallen silent, as if bowing to his authority. I sank onto the bed, heart racing, trapped not by chains but by inevitability. The notebook still lay on the floor where I'd dropped it, pages spread wide like an open mouth gasping for air. From where I sat, I could see the words crawling across the paper again, rewriting themselves line by line, always circling back to the same command. There can only be one. Pixel leapt onto the bed, landing inches from me. His eyes bore into mine, and I felt my thoughts flicker like film frames, moments of my past spooling backward and forward without my control. Childhood memories, arguments I had forgotten, nights staring at ceilings, fearing the future, all of them rushing through me, but none of them felt like mine anymore. They were evidence, stored files waiting to be judged, to be overwritten. My head throbbed, my body trembling under the weight of recollection that wasn't entirely mine to hold. I tried to reach for him again, maybe to beg, maybe to prove there was still something of the Pixel I had known. But when my fingers brushed his fur, the cold fire seared deeper this time, traveling up my arm, locking my shoulder in place. My vision went black at the edges, and in that dark I saw something terrible. 1,000 golden eyes watching, each one a Pixel stationed in another rewrite, guarding another Michael. The scale of it broke me. The knowledge that I was just one of countless trials, one more subject trapped in the same cage. When the darkness receded, I was on the floor, my cheek pressed against the ash. Pixel stood over me, his tail wrapped around my throat like a leash. He didn't tighten it, but the message was clear. Try to run. And he would. His mouth opened once more, and though the sound was fractured, I understood it all too well. Integration, he rasped, his voice echoing like a machine confirming an input. The word chilled me deeper than any whisper could. I forced myself up, lungs burning, and stared at him. He stared back, patient, unblinking, merciless. He was no longer a companion. He was the keeper of the rule, the sentinel of the rewrite, and I understood then that I wasn't battling ghosts or reflections anymore. I was battling the system itself, and Pixel was its warden. I couldn't breathe inside that room anymore. Every second with Pixel's eyes on me felt like a sentence waiting to be read aloud, so I forced myself toward the door. His tail brushed against my ankle as if in warning, but he didn't stop me this time. Maybe he wanted me to see what waited outside. My hand hovered over the handle, half expecting it to burn, but when I twisted, the door opened too easily, swinging wide into a night that hummed like a faulty speaker. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. The parking lot stretched before me, lit by the dying neon signs sputtering in half-hearted intervals. The cars were all there, lined in perfect rows, but none of them had drivers. Engines idled, exhaust curling into the cold air, doors hanging ajar, as though people had stepped out only a second ago. The silence made it worse. It felt like walking into the middle of a play after the actors had left the stage. I stepped forward cautiously, the ash from my shoes marking the cracked asphalt. Behind me, I could feel Pixel lingering in the doorway, his gaze following like a tether I couldn't shake. At first I thought I saw movement, shapes in the distance walking along the edge of the lot, clustered near the old vending machines. Relief hit me like water after thirst, but when I called out, the figures turned, and my voice died in my throat. They had no faces. Smooth skin stretched where eyes and mouths should have been, and yet they turned toward me with recognition, as if they still knew who I was. One lifted a hand and waved, the gesture almost cheerful, but the emptiness where its smile should have been hollowed me out. I backed away, heart pounding, but the faceless crowd began to multiply, spilling across the lot like water breaching a dam. Some walked, some staggered, and some simply stood, tilting their heads in unison, the blank skin quivering like it wanted to rearrange into something familiar, but couldn't decide what. One of them reached the nearest car, placed its hand on the hood, and the entire vehicle collapsed inward, disintegrating into a heap of ash that blew apart in the night wind. The others followed, touching lampposts, trash bins, even the air itself, unraveling everything into nothing. I ran, past the vending machines, past the dead cars, past the shapes that tried to grab at me with fingers that dissolved when they closed around air. My lungs burned, but the world gave me no relief. The further I went, the less real it became. Buildings lined the street, but their windows were painted black, like sets in a stage play. Streetlights hummed above, but the light they cast didn't reach the ground. I turned a corner and found a crowd packed shoulder to shoulder, hundreds of people standing silent. For one desperate second, I thought they were real. Then I saw that every one of them was eyeless, mouthless, breathing softly through nothing. A car sped past, headlights blazing, but when I squinted through the glare, the driver's seat was empty. Another followed, then another, a stream of vehicles tearing through the streets with no one behind the wheel. The sound of engines roared in my ears, but the absence of hands on steering wheels was louder. I pressed myself against the wall of a building, but even that betrayed me. My palm left an imprint in the brick, and when I pulled away, the wall flaked apart into dust, collapsing onto the sidewalk. The whole city was nothing but a sketch, a temporary draft. My chest heaved, the rule of one. This world didn't need details, didn't need permanence, it only needed me. Everything else was filler, placeholders, constructs holding shape until the rewrite finished. The faceless crowd shuffled closer, and though they had no mouths, I heard them whisper my name again and again, voices echoing from inside my skull. Their bodies flickered at the edges, sometimes Michael-shaped, sometimes collapsing into static ash. They weren't people at all. They were discarded drafts, fragments of the rewrite pretending to be a world. I turned and bolted back toward the motel, the only structure that still felt solid, even if its solidity was a trap. The neon sign loomed ahead, now frozen on a single fractured word. Vany. No vacancy, no meaning, just me. Pixel was still there in the doorway, his eyes two golden lanterns cutting through the dark. He stepped aside as I stumbled in, letting me collapse to the floor, gasping. The faceless figures crowded at the edge of the parking lot but did not cross the threshold. They stood like an audience, waiting for the next scene. The room was worse now, wallpaper peeling in strips, furniture reduced to skeletal outlines, as though someone had only half-finished drawing them. The notebook lay open on the bed, the words shifting with every flicker of light. There can only be one. Each repetition felt less like writing and more like a chant. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to block it out, but the sound was already inside me. This wasn't a world. It was a rehearsal, and I was the only actor not allowed to leave the stage. That was when I noticed the floor. The carpet had split along the seam between the bed and the dresser, a hairline crack that hadn't been there before. Ash fell into it like sand into an hourglass. I knelt, trembling, and pulled at the edge until it peeled away, revealing a hatch disguised beneath the carpet. My stomach turned cold, because it wasn't just a hiding place. It was an entrance, a door leading down, deeper than this layer of reality wanted me to know about. Pixel moved closer, his eyes burning brighter, tail twitching like a metronome. He didn't block the hatch. He didn't stop me. If anything, he seemed to guard it, waiting for me to understand what I was meant to find. I pressed my ear to the crack, and beneath the hum of the motel's failing lights, I heard it. The thrum of machinery, steady and alive, like a heartbeat magnified into the bones of the earth. I pulled the hatch fully open, the air below rushing up into my face. It smelled of copper, burnt wires, and ink spilled too long ago. The shadows of pipes and cables twisted down into the dark, disappearing into a place that pulsed with its own rhythm. My skin crawled with recognition before my mind caught up. This was where it began. This was where the rewrite was born. Hook. At the bottom of the stairs, glowing faintly through the dark, I saw it waiting. An impossible machine, cables writhing like roots, screens flickering with names I recognized. And at the center of them all, one burned brighter than the rest. Michael Brennan. The hatch yawned open, exhaling air that smelled like copper and old ink. I gripped the edges, hesitant to climb down, but the hum beneath me was magnetic. It wasn't just sound, it was rhythm, pulse, intention, a heartbeat too large for any creature, too steady for anything living. The metal steps groaned under my weight as I descended, each clang echoing through the hollow shaft. The motel above felt like it sealed itself behind me, and with each step I sank deeper into something that had always been waiting. The walls of the stairwell were alive with veins of cable, thick and black, writhing faintly as though they carried not power but blood. Small sparks bled from them, illuminating flashes of writing scratched into the metal, fragments of rules I half remembered. Do not answer the door. Burn the mirror. There can only be one. Each line flickered as I passed, fading into nonsense the further I went. My hand brushed against the railing, and it pulsed beneath my fingers, warm like skin. I almost pulled back, but if I let go, I knew the darkness below would swallow me whole. When I reached the bottom, The air pressed against me with the weight of a storm. The chamber stretched wide, cavernous, filled with machinery that breathed in unison. Towers of glass and steel rose like pillars, each one strung with wires that twisted together into a massive knot at the center. Screens flickered in the dark, dozens, hundreds, each one glowing with a name. I squinted, heart rattling in my chest as I realized what I was seeing. Every screen bore the same name, Michael Brennan, but no two were the same. Some glowed red, some green, some dimmed into static. Each one a version, each one a draft. I stumbled closer, my shoes crunching over a floor layered in ash and broken fragments of glass. A screen sparked as I passed, displaying a Michael with hollow eyes and a rope around his neck. Another showed one hunched in a motel bathroom, blood staining his shirt. Another still, silent and still, lying on the floor of a burning room. My breath caught, choking me with the realization. These weren't random names, they were me. All of me. All. The Michaels left behind, cataloged, displayed, waiting for judgment. At the center of the room stood the machine, the rewrite engine. Its frame was too vast to take in at once, a structure of metal ribs that reached up into the dark ceiling, branching into roots that burrowed into the floor. Wires writhed like living arteries, pulsing with dim light, feeding the cluster of screens that formed its beating heart. The sound of it was unbearable, not mechanical grinding, but the endless rustle of pages being torn and replaced, one after another, faster than I could follow. It was rewriting not just me, but everything around me, again and again until the draft held. Pixel appeared at my side without a sound. He wasn't a cat anymore, not really. His body bent and twisted, shadow bleeding into his fur, tail splitting into cables that lashed across the floor to connect with the engine. His golden eyes blazed brighter than the screens, twin suns recording every twitch of my body, every tremor in my voice. When he spoke, it wasn't broken this time. It was clear, calm, inhuman. Subject MB, rewrite incomplete, awaiting integration. The words struck me harder than any wound. Subject MB. That was me. Michael Brennan wasn't a man anymore. He was a file. I staggered back, shaking my head, but the screens around me lit up in waves, thousands of faces, all turning toward me at once. Some screamed, some smiled, some bled, some prayed. The voices layered over one another in an unbearable chorus. Choose, choose, choose. My knees buckled under the weight of it. The ash on the ground rose, swirling into half-formed bodies, all of them reaching for me, desperate to be chosen, to be the one that survived. My own face stared back at me from 100 angles, each demanding that I surrender to them. The engine responded to my hesitation. Its cables snapped and writhed, slamming against the walls, sending sparks raining across the chamber. One screen flared brighter than the others, displaying my face exactly as I was now. Eyes wide, chest heaving, hand trembling. Beneath the image, red text scrolled across the bottom. Integration required. The words repeated, faster, louder, until the walls themselves seemed to chant it. My ears rang. My skull felt like it was splitting open. Pixel moved closer, tail still plugged into the machine, and his voice dropped into a whisper that rattled my bones. You are not Michael. You are the draft. The engine requires completion. He leaned closer, his golden eyes filling my vision until I couldn't see the room anymore, only the reflection of myself breaking apart into pieces. My stomach twisted. All the rules, all the nights, all the horrors, they hadn't been meant to protect me. They were instructions written for the rewrite, scaffolding to keep me in place until the engine decided what to keep. I wanted to scream, to run, but the ground beneath me cracked open. The ash swirled upward, forming shadows that dragged at my arms and legs. Screens above me flickered faster, scrolling through version after version of me, dying, surviving, failing, begging. My chest seized with the certainty that I was not a survivor. I was an option, a placeholder, a prototype waiting to be erased. Then the engine spoke. Not through Pixel, not through the screens, but directly, vibrating in the marrow of my bones. Subject MB. Rewrite incomplete. Proceed with integration. The cable snapped forward, wrapping around my wrists and chest, pulling me toward the core. My heels scraped against the floor as I fought, but the ash dragged me forward too, a tide of forgotten versions hungry to merge with me. The golden light from Pixel's eyes bathed me, recording my every desperate motion, burning the moment into permanence. I clawed at the floor, but my fingers only carved lines in the ash. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the roar of tearing pages and chanting voices. Pixel's mouth opened, and for the first time, I saw his teeth, sharp, metallic, endless. Completion or erasure, he intoned. There can only be one. The screen in front of me flared blinding white, my name burning across it in letters too bright to look at. Michael Brennan. The letters warped, fractured, split into dozens of overlapping versions, then snapped back into one. I realized what it meant. I wasn't here to survive. I was here to decide whether I would become the chosen Michael or destroy the draft entirely. If I accepted integration, I would vanish into the engine, my identity absorbed. If I resisted, the rewrite would collapse, wiping out not just me, but every version, every trace. The cables tightened around me, pulling me into the light. My breath came in broken sobs, my vision shattering into fragments of myself, screaming from every screen. My last thought before the brightness consumed me was not whether I would survive, but which Michael the engine would let remain. The light swallowed everything. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over, that I'd been erased, that the engine had chosen silence over survival. But then, in the white roar, I heard a sound that didn't belong. Not the tearing of pages, not the chanting of versions, but a single voice cutting through the noise. My own voice, except it wasn't speaking from my throat. It was behind me, above me, around me. You're not done yet. The brightness fractured, peeling back into slivers of darkness, and through the cracks I glimpsed something worse than the engine, a place where the rules hadn't been written yet, where nothing had form, where anything could be rewritten from scratch. Pixel's golden eyes blinked once in the void, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if he was warden or prisoner.